welcome to my channel.
So, if you're totally new to crocheting, I guess maybe it's a bit of a jungle of yarns out there, and maybe you're a little bit confused about what you need or what you want. So, I suggest if you look at this paper band around every skein of yarn you will find, there will be information right here that tells you about this kind of yarn. So here it will say if it's that it's cotton, you get 250 grams, 1000 meters, or 1093 yards. And this will tell you how many stitches there will be if you're knitting. So there will be maybe 25 stitches of knitting in 10 centimeters this way, and 34 rows of knitting on 10 centimeters this way. In crocheting, there will be very different because knitting is all the same mostly, but in crocheting you get all different kinds of stitches. So that will not be for crocheting, but for knitting. And here there's the knitting needles. You can use this sizes of knitting needles, and this is a crochet hook which will be this sizes. And here is how to wash the clothes if you're making clothes. So it will be 30 degrees in the washing machine. And this is the yarn. I don't know how to. This is the yarn. Oh my god, what's it called? It's number 2 because it's fine yarn. It's kind of thin. It's very thin, so it's a fine yarn. There are classifications. So a thicker yarn will have another number. But this is pretty thin. That's why a 3.5 or 4 millimeters crochet hook will be good for this yarn, and a bit smaller knitting needles. I guess if you're using a 2.5 knitting needle, it will be pretty small stitches, and that's also why 34 rows, that's a lot of rows for 10 centimeters. And if you we can look at another kind of yarn, a wool yarn. Just a second. Here is a wool yarn. That's a group C because it's another producer. So this is a different kind of yarn groups. And here you can see it's recommended a needle or hook number 5. And the knitting tension is here. And you get 70 meters in 50 grams of skein. 70 meters is a pretty small amount of yarn, so it's kind of thick. That's why you get less yarn. If it's a thinner type, you get more yarn in 50 grams. That all varies on the type of yarn. So if you're knitting, you will use a little bit less than if you're crocheting. So about 1,000 meters for a sweater will be maybe sufficient in crocheting, but definitely enough yarn to knit a sweater. And if you're wondering if you get the right tension here, you can test a little. You knit a little square to check if your knitting tension is right with what's here. And if you're crocheting, you will just have to try making a little bit of usually we make a little square if it's very important how big your clothes get. But often in crocheting we may be crocheting like scarves, and not the size won't matter as much. But if you're making a sweater, it will probably be important to check if your how many stitches you will need for 10 centimeters. That's how you can check if your size will be correct. Here I have crocheted some squares. I use a bit smaller hook when I'm crocheting granny squares, because if I don't, they will be a bit loose. So here it's kind of firm to touch and a little stiffer squares. If I use the recommended hook, I will get a bit larger stitches and they will be more fluffy or more wiggly. So if you're crocheting something, I would recommend to use a bit the smaller hook. So if it's recommended to use 3.5 or 4 millimeters, I will probably use a 4 millimeters sometimes, but also sometimes I will use 3 millimeters. For this here I'm using a 4 millimeters, and the stitches will be a bit larger than if I would use a 3 millimeter hook. But this is a hexagon cardigan, and so I would, first of all, I'm a kind of lazy crocheter, so I would use a larger hook just to get the product finished a little quicker. And also, it won't matter as much as long as I know how many stitches I will need to get the size I need. But the hexagon cardigan is also a cardigan you crochet till it fits, so that won't be important here. But in the squares, I will use a smaller hook just to get a firmer square, as I said. And if you're crocheting after a pattern you've bought or found for free, maybe it will say in the pattern how many stitches you'll have to crochet in one 10 centimeter in 10 centimeters to get the right size in the pattern, because then the pattern maker have probably been calculating how many stitches you are making in this amount of centimeters or yards to get the right size. And if you don't have the right amount of stitches, you will get a bigger or smaller size than you want, and that's kind of sucky if you are a beginner. So I also make this t-shirt, which I also used a bigger hook than is recommended. But as you see, it won't matter as much. The stitches look pretty much the same and it's looking good even though the hook is a little bit bigger. But if you're using a too big of a hook, it will be very loose stitches, so it could be looking a bit messier. But if you're wondering what kind of yarn you should buy for your first project, you can also find the type of yarn in your patterns. If you're buying patterns, it will probably say so there, and very often it's possible to use another type of yarn because there's so many yarns to choose from. So if you want to change the yarn in your pattern with another type of yarn, you can use this information and probably get same result with another type of yarn. What you do is you just check how many meters in the same amount of skein. So you have to check the yarn you're supposed to use, and you can check if it's the same group, if you need the same needle, if it's the same gauge like this, or if it's the same amount of meters in 50 grams, that will probably tell you that it's okay to use another type of yarn. Yeah. And for the beginning of the stitches, I have another video with how you start your crocheting projects. And I suggest practice, practice, and practice, because that's the only way to get perfect. I guess you will have a lot of fun trying it out. And if you want to learn more about yarn, I do want to make more videos with that. So I guess I will do that in the future, because I love talking about yarn. I love talking about my projects, and I don't really know if I'm supposed to talk in Norwegian or in English, so I'm doing a little bit of both. So this is in English, but my last video with talking about yarn, I was talking Norwegian. So I guess I'm trying to reach both audiences. Yeah, and here's my yarn closet. It's so messy right now. So, yeah. Do you know how yarn is addictive? I guess it's so fun to buy a lot of yarn, but yeah, it will look like this after a while. But I hope you'll have fun trying out crocheting, and just comment below if you want to know something I didn't tell you, or if I was being unclear about something. I would love to help you get started. Thank you. Bye.